I was born in the darkness, molded by it. I didn't see the light of day till I was a man, and by then, I was already ready to record a video. Or actually, spoiler alert, re-record a video because my 18-minute video that I just recorded ended up getting stopped because my storage was full. So, yeah, second time's the charm. Today I'm going to be talking about adult horror, and I am going to be talking about a short story / anthology collection of extreme horror and dark fantasy. Now, I did review adult horror before on this channel. It was Night Shift by Stephen King, which is one of my favorite short story collections of all time so far. Absolutely loved it. I don't think there's any bad stories in there, and there's some fantastic bangers in there as well. But this one gives that a run for its money. Now, this is only 6 stories, so they're longer. One of them is novelette length. But man, Nathan Ballingrud, I hope that's how you pronounce your name. Sorry if I butcher it. My bad, OG. You wrote some fire. I love this book, but I don't know how to say your name. Nathan Ballingrud. He manages to create this mythical, Lovecraftian world of hell, his own version of his world of hell. And in each of these anthological stories involving immoral and criminal kind of people, for most of them, you basically get bits and pieces of information and lore that kind of paint the picture of what hell is, its entire civilization, its dynamic languages, world, and creatures. There's a lot of badass creatures and creature features in here. There's some dark and disturbing gore. There's some crazy disturbing visuals. There's some dark themes, some deeper moral and ethical stuff. And overall, it's just a fantastic package for adult horror. So I would recommend that everybody who's an adult checks this out. And if you're a brave enough kid, I don't condone you reading this because it's very dark and disturbing. Probably will give you nightmares and freak you out. But I can't stop you, all right? I was a kid who at like 6 years old watched Adult Swim. What do I know? I'm a bad example. But either way, let's talk about Nathan Ballingrud's, whatever, the author's amazing work here. So this short story collection gets a 9.5 out of 10. I absolutely loved it. It has, again, a lot of badass and awesome creatures in there. It has some dark and disturbing violence and gore. It has some crazy themes and settings involving the mythology of this Lovecraftian world of hell that the author creates. Its own settings, its landscapes, its languages, its themes and stuff involving the story. So yeah, and there was a lot of imagery in here that reminded me of video games like Resident Evil and Bloodborne and Dark Souls that I thought was super awesome. Eldritch horror and those kind of darker settings. And on top of that, the last story in this collection was like a novelette length, and it felt like I was watching a movie. It was basically this badass movie that I was watching, and it essentially, each story reveals more and more about the mythology of hell, and that final story is like this grandiose finale to wrap everything up, and it was fantastic. I loved it. A perfect short story collection, although I am wanting more. I wish we could get more because I was so fascinated by the world. However, it was so deep and so dark and so awesome that I do kind of want to step away and take a break. But I am going to be reading more work by Nathan Ballingrud. His novels. If he has any full-length novels, I'll check them out if I can. I know he has some other short story collections which are famous, like the North American Lake Monsters one, which is on a lot of best short story collection lists. So I do own that one, and I will be reading it sometime soon. And yeah, let's get into this review. 9.5 out of 10. Fantastic, amazing, dark, and great for adults. So let's talk about it. So again, as the title says, there are 6 stories in here, and each of them reveal a little bit more about the world of hell and what it encompasses for the author's idea and mythical version of it. So the first story in here is called The Atlas from Hell. And this one gets an 8.5 out of 10 for me, which makes it a really good / quite great story. This one is basically about this thief in a local town who basically runs this bookstore. And as you find out, he has some satanic and dark magic books in there. And he actually made his fortune off of stealing things and items and selling them on the black market. And by doing so, he's involved with this like mafia / organized crime group kind of thing, and has ties with the boss and stuff. And as you go through the story, he has an encounter with the boss, and the boss basically threatens his life, saying, you gotta help me with this task, or else I'm basically gonna take your life or kill you, or expose you to some dark things. And essentially, he gets forced into the position where he has to help him out. And it turns out that one of his colleagues or employees or dealers, I guess, basically went rogue and started selling stuff in the black market without paying his dues, and then ran off into the Louisiana bayou or something, out in the swamp, out in this ramshackle kind of shed or something where he lives out of. So basically, the main character, who's this thief librarian and a bodyguard slash kind of assassin that works for the boss, has to go out to the swamp and fetch him back to the boss and fetch back some of his material. Because as you find out, yes, they sell things on the black market. However, they are not normal drugs or weapons, as you would imagine on the black market. No, they sell paraphernalia and merchandise from hell. Items from hell. Stuff like pieces of stone from the rocks of hell, which a single stone the size of like this Blistex, keep your lips moisturized, people. A stone the size of this Blistex could weigh as much as a fridge. Stuff like that, like unnatural things, and even parts of bones from like corpses of people that you may know and creatures and stuff. He basically starts selling stuff on the black market without their consoling or without paying the dues, and they have to go fetch him back. And as they head to the Louisiana Bayou Swamp, they find the guy, and they find out what he has. And he has the Atlas from Hell, which is tucked behind a closed door. And right away, the two guys find out that something's not quite right, and they're in for a whole shit ton of trouble. And as soon as the main character opens that door, you get flooded with the symphony of madness, and you find out what the Atlas from Hell is, what it basically invokes, how it involves the languages of hell, which can incite madness within people, cause you to go crazy, cause you to become violent, do irrational things. And you find out that the Atlas from Hell is not quite exactly a book. It may or may not be something that relates to Voyagers. Voyagers, who are humans that sign contracts of darkness and basically sell their souls in a way to travel to hell and basically walk its perimeters and walk its borders, and in turn study its languages, its civilization, its creatures, and its basically cartography and world. So they basically study under it, and they're kind of like monks. However, these monks are not quite normal because since they have to basically sign a contract, the only way they can survive in hell without being tampered by the madness, the darkness, and essentially corroded into a crazy thing, because that's what hell does, it infects people, is they have to wear this metal box around their head. And this metal box entraps them within darkness and basically allows them to somehow basically protect themselves from the outside world of hell, while at the same time have extraordinary senses. And these are the monks, the monks of, I think, the Order of the Black Iron Monks is what they're called. This religious cult over there that studies the cartography and world of hell. Very interesting. And this item may or may not relate to those guys, and in turn it starts causing crazy things to happen. You have this monster out in the bayou, which is described as being horrifying and crazy. That monster reminded me a lot of like a final boss or something you would see out in like Resident Evil 7, involving the dad swimming through the swamp. Maybe that's giving a little bit too much away, but again, the monster design, very different from that dad, but just the same vibe, the same ominous feeling. And you find out that this black market trading stuff with hell in the human world comes with consequences, and it basically slowly starts infecting the human world, and these guys' lives are put at risk, and you find out some of the crazy stuff behind it. Again, this gets an 8.5 out of 10. It was great, had a lot of good body horror, some ideas of Lovecraftian, deities infecting people's madness. Creatures, you have some crazy monsters and creatures and stuff talked about in here. And overall, it was a fun premise. I enjoyed it. So 8.5 out of 10. The next story in this book is called, I believe, let me check here. It's the Diabolist or Diabolist. This is basically revolving around a suburb or town that has an urban legend involving this abandoned sort of mansion where this guy lives in there. And he's basically accused of doing witchcraft and black magic, which you turn out to find out that he is a satanic worshiper and does perform and dabble within the dark arts. And people in the town or suburbs see this crazy stuff happening by his house. And as they see this crazy stuff, they basically create these urban legends and accuse him of things. And then you find out from an unknown perspective about how he eventually passes away, and you find out about his daughter. And his daughter is quite young, quite innocent, and as she grows up and becomes a teenager, she starts realizing that she's very much pit against odds. The entire town basically treats her like an outcast, like this evil being, just because of what her dad did. And one day she heads down into the basement where her dad basically performed these experiments, performed these dark arts, finds out about all this stuff, and then finds out the reason why he was performing this kind of sort of dark magic. And it may or may not have been to connect to some emotional figure in their life, both the daughter and dad's life. And as the dad was trying to, in a way, bring back that emotional figure, he managed to summon back instead a creature from hell that was not supposed to be in the human world. And he entrapped it, and then that creature and the daughter interact. And you get these deeper themes behind. Basically, the creature starts understanding human philosophy, human mentality, human emotions, despite, coming from a very different dark world and not knowing anything of that nature. Kind of pays homage to like robot stories, android stories, or foreigners or aliens interacting with humans, that kind of stuff. And that sort of all plays within a deeper theme here, which adds some layers to it. I do like the story involving the family. I do like this creature's design description of where they came from, what their role is within the world of hell, and how they sort of figure out the girl. And basically the girl and the creature kind of become interconnected in a way. And you find out more about urban legends and stuff like that, how it sparks, and the truth behind that. That's kind of what the story's going for. It got an 8 out of 10. This is, again, a quite good, really good story. Not as good as the first one, mostly because there's a lot of abstract imagery in here and some abstract symbolism, which kind of took me out. I can deal with that stuff. It's good. It adds layers to stories, but at the same time, it sort of kind of takes me away from the story as well. But overall, it wasn't overbearing. I still enjoyed it. I still loved it. And I think it's great. Definitely check out this one. I wish this could have been a novelette in its own way. Could have fleshed out the characters more, could have found out more stuff involving the family, the town, and stuff like that. But I think it did overall a pretty good job. So 8 out of 10, good story. And the ending is very haunting. Now, I think there's a scene from the Haunting Hour episode Intruders involving the Fae. There's a similar ending like that here, and it's quite horrifying, quite terrifying indeed. And it does have, again, a deeper moral message behind it. So, yeah, still a really good story. So that one gets an 8 out of 10. Next one is my least favorite story in the book. However, it's still a good story. Not bad by any means. And that is Skull Pocket. Skull Pocket is basically kind of like a adult horror version of Halloween Town involving hell. Basically, you find out about this cult that worships this maggot, or I don't know if that's supposed to represent the devil, but this maggot god. I don't know if that relates to Beelzebub or something, but it's about this cult in this town by Chesapeake Bay that worships a maggot, and you have this old guy who's very close to death, and the head priest of this church, of this cult, is a ghoul, a literal skeletal, disgusting ghoul. And you have another figure who helps him out, which is a severed head stitched up in a jar of floating green liquid that's rolled around on wheels and talks through a little speaker on the jar. Crazy story, crazy world. You basically kind of just get thrown into it. And you find out that these kids are gathered at this church, these group of kids that got selected by the maggot. For some reason, they got this dream and they got selected here. And the ghoul that's about to die basically tells a story about the urban legend involving Chesapeake Bay and this creatures of hell, which is basically telling about these three ghoul children who came up from the cemetery because ghouls live under the city in these catacombs or tombs. They used to roam by the cemetery, and they happen to head up to this fair, this carnival fair, this amusement park thing going on at Chesapeake Bay. They see all the laughing children, the people, the screaming, the excitement, all the colorful lights and the carnival and circus and freak show stuff there. And they basically are lit up and they kind of want to become a part of it. And as they happen to cross over and kind of experience some of that stuff, this major dark event happens, and essentially from that point onward, the ghouls and the humans create this contract where the ghouls are basically protecting them from the forces of hell attacking the town at Chesapeake Bay, which may or may not involve the Kraken. Yes, the Kraken is a giant monster from hell, which is pretty cool, but that's something like they made a contract with them that they're allowed to live in this town and kind of create this church and cult, and at the same time have socioeconomic status there and enjoy, the beauties of the human world, and at the same time in return they'll protect the humans from these hell creatures and stuff that are kind of invading the globe. So a very interesting story, but you kind of get thrown into it without any real explanation or buildup of the setting or town or ghouls and the cult and church. It's like Nightmare Before Christmas and Halloween Town does explain the stuff beforehand before throwing you into it. This one kind of throws you in the middle of it. You're left very confused by certain things that you're just kind of like, what the hell? What the fuck are they guys? What the fuck are these guys talking about? I don't know what the hell they're talking about. No pun intended. And then you kind of just slowly figure out what's going on. And the ending is quite disturbing and dark, so I liked it. But this one gets a 7.3 out of 10. It's good, but a lot of that stuff of being thrown in there, some pacing problems. This story jumps all over the place and kind of throws you off. And again, some abstract, unanswered stuff involving the church and the cult and some things. So, yeah, kind of left a bit to be desired, but still a good story, and I definitely recommend it. The next story in here, the fourth one, is called The Maw. And The Maw is basically about this suburb / town that got infested, and invaded by these hell monsters that basically transformed the town, killed a bunch of people in horrific ways, and you're told this perspective of these refugees / survivors who basically have to rescue something or somebody and venture back into that hellscape that the town has become, like a no man's land kind of thing. And the monsters that invade this town are quite terrifying. They're described as being called surgeons, and they are these 8-foot tall, skinny, decrepit, decaying corpse, Slender Man, Wendigo, rake-like things that do horrific things to people. The way they kill you is they do it in one of the most disturbing ways possible. And it may or may not involve maybe potentially making you into decorations or experiments or part of this disturbing architecture of hell that they want to place across, I guess, this town for some reason. And yeah, very disturbing, very dark. Again, imagine like the descriptions of the Wendigos, very tall, slender figures with long hands and claws and stuff, and basically doing horrific things to people. And these are two refugees. This one girl who's quite experienced of getting people in, and getting them out of this town. And then this one guy, this old guy who's never loved anything, but loves a companion of his that got left behind in this town, or actually ran off back into this town for some reason, and he has to go rescue them, hoping that they're still alive in the midst of all this chaos that's going on. And the setting of this felt very much like Bloodborne. If you've ever played Bloodborne, this feels like that, so you kind of get that video game type of crazy setting. I love the monster designs in this. The stuff they do to humans is so disturbing. When you find out the architecture of hell that takes place over this town, it's disturbing. Hearing them move and do stuff is crazy. And when the main characters finally reach this place where they have to save this companion, it's described as being horrific, a horrific place. And again, you find out about, the languages of hell, some of the stuff involving it. And, it's a very intense, dark situation. Again, the whole setting is set up as like these people got invaded, attacked, killed. The refugees were left behind. No money, no water, no military aid. The police left them, and now they're just struggling in no man's land. Kind of like a zombie apocalypse, but much darker, much more disturbing. And you have the eldritch horrors of Bloodborne kind of in there. So that's how it kind of is. So yeah, 9 out of 10. Fantastic story, very dark. Kind of heartwarming in certain areas, but the ending is super dark, super ominous, and again, feels very much Lovecraftian, which is why I say this author gives Lovecraft a run for his money, because this stuff is fantastic, man. I absolutely enjoy it and love it quite a bit. So yeah, 9 out of 10 story. This is great. My second favorite story in this entire collection. The fifth story in here, the next one, is called The Visible Filth, and I believe this actually had a Hulu film adaptation, because on the cover of my book it says that this book was being turned into a movie. So I was like, is this whole anthology gonna be turned into a movie? But it turns out no. The Visible Filth, this story got adapted. I read the plot summary of it, and I think the movie changes quite a bit of stuff compared to the short story here. So I have to see the movie. I don't know how I feel about it, especially since they changed some stuff. It still sounds like a great standalone movie, but I kind of prefer this story because, again, if you forget this, each of these 6 stories have pieces in mythology of hell that carry throughout each story until the climax, the very last one, the one after this. So it's all interwoven by the mythological world of hell. It's just different people, different settings, and different time periods that kind of bring out more pieces of information. So the movie kind of changing the plot kind of takes away from that, and you'll kind of find out when I talk about the story. So this next story, The Visible Filth, is about this New Orleans bartender who works there and basically struggles with the idea of infidelity. You know, he has a partner right now who he's not satisfied with and doesn't really feel much connection towards anymore. And there's this bartender girl who always stops by his bar and he kind of falls in love with, but she's also into infidelity and kind of plays guys and does that kind of stuff. So you have this sort of imagery involving cockroaches that have infested New Orleans. You know, New Orleans got cockroaches all around. And the main character, this bartender, describes how he finds them so disgusting and how they're so nasty. And whenever he sees them crawling over the bottles or over his, bar or even his house or anywhere in New Orleans, he gets grossed out because they're basically like this visible filth that's everywhere. And New Orleans has this visible filth, and that plays as symbolism because he's a filthy guy. He's into infidelity and has these dark thoughts. So what happens one night is that as he's discussing or conversating with the girl, the bartender that he likes, and then discussing with her new boyfriend, just stuff about life and kind of coming up with some ideas, there's a fight that breaks out with this gang of guys. One of them lives, I think, in an apartment or something above the bar. And they get into a bar fight. There's this group of college kids sitting at a table who are relatively quiet, just to themselves. And then this fight breaks out. Everything goes into chaos in the bar. And then, the college kids run out of there. And the bar fight is broken up. The main guy leaves away. And then the guy who lives upstairs, his friend Eric, who was in this bar fight, basically gets this huge scar across his face. That, he doesn't want to go to the hospital because he can't afford it. It starts becoming infected and quite gross. And as they walk away, as the bartender's about to leave and wrap up, he finds a phone. This big phone that was left behind, a smartphone that was left behind at one of the tables. And he believes it may have belonged to one of the college kids. And as he heads back to his apartment, back to his girl, and you kind of figure out how his life is and how he wants to kind of change it up and give into these dark, intrusive thoughts that he has, he starts getting these text messages from a person on the phone that says, help, please, it's inside the house with me. I need to get out. I need help. Please help me. And he thinks this is some college kid playing a prank because they may have realized that he has their friend's phone. They're trying to play a prank on him. He dismisses it until one day another person starts threatening them and tells them to open up the photo album and check out the photos and the images. And what's on these photos and images is quite dark and disturbing. This is going to be a little bit of a spoiler, so I'll just throw out my peace fingers right now. If you want to skip over this to not get any spoilers, go ahead. I'm not going to give the context as to what this is, but I'm just going to describe the scene. He sees a video on the phone, and the video shows this victim being killed, their head being severed off, the decapitated head being put on top of a table with a pentagram of blood around it put in the middle, and then the killer, who's off screen, cuts a star-shaped hole into the dome of the head of the severed skull, waits for it to start slowly rotting and decaying, and out from the top of this severed head, inside of the star-shaped gaping hole put into the severed head, 4 pale fingers crawl out and grip the forehead of the severed head and pull the eyes up, and then that's where the video ends. Peace fingers down, spoilers over.
Again, not going to give the context as to what that explains. You'll find out as you finish the story, but it is a very dark and disturbing story. This one is very much sort of like modern horror compared to the other ones I read in this book, especially the next one, which takes place in the past. This is a more so modern horror story involving technology, that sort of infidelity and stuff like that. Infidelity is constant, but dealing with these college kids and these bartenders and stuff like that. And it's quite dark and disturbing. And then the stuff in that phone, the stuff in the phone and videos is not just limited to what I said, it's other stuff as well. And you find out about these rituals, and you find out the origins behind certain characters that were in the bar that night. And yeah, let's just say the main character may be put into a really rough situation and see something horrible by the end. And it's quite disturbing and dark as you find out what that video may have entailed or meant. Another monster thing involving the mythological world of hell. So yeah, that one gets a 8.6 out of 10. It's a great story. I can see why they wanted to adapt it into a movie. Fantastic story, very dark, very disturbing. Good modern horror for adults. And yeah, great story overall. The last story in here, the sixth one, gets a whopping 10 out of 10. This is a perfect short story to me. Wonderful, fantastic, had everything I wanted. Awesome monsters, badass creatures, intense action, dark violence and gore, really disturbing themes and imagery, some messed up characters, and a wide variety of characters and personalities. A great setting that paints involving this supernatural world as well as the physical world interconnecting. You find out the relationships of humanity and hell. And yeah, this whole novelette, this 100-page last story, felt like I was watching a movie. And this last story is the reason why I picked up this book, because I heard a review for it and it sounded wild. And then I finally picked up the book, and now that I've read it, I understand why it was such a crazy and well-beloved story. And that is the final story, the sixth one, called The Butcher's Table. This story is basically Pirates of the Caribbean meets hell. And if that sounds badass, oh fuck yes it is. Fuck yeah, this is badass, bro. This is basically about taking place in the past, back to where, I don't know what the era is, when there was pirates, the Pirates of the Caribbean type of setting, that type of era of pirates. There's this English gentleman who you find out is a satanic worshiper. He is a part of a cult which basically meet up and basically have a relationship. They do dealings with hell. He's a part of this cult, and they are partners with this other cult as well that involves a cannibal priest. And yes, these guys have cannibal feasts. They eat humans, and he falls in love with the daughter of this cannibal priest. And this relationship may potentially lead him to being killed, because it's considered to be taboo. However, he's trying to figure out a way to get with her. And you find out that there's an expedition being held by this cult where they want to actually venture into hell and commit this ceremonial feast, which is a giant banquet feast that happens on the borders of hell that the Satan himself is invited into. You don't actually see Satan in the story, spoiler alert, but Satan is invited to this feast, and it's a giant cannibalistic feast. And you find out that this cult and church basically may or may not be involved with stuff like human cattle and human sacrifices and really disgusting ritualistic stuff. And this expedition into hell, into the dark waters of hell, is being carried out by this English gentleman, this cannibal priest, his daughter, who he's in love with, and then these pirates, famous pirates, who may or may not have connections to hell as well. And basically they are taking this giant Pirates of the Caribbean type of voyage on this massive ship called the Butcher's Table. And they're riding out through the dark seas from this kind of, I think, Caribbean village that they were stocking up materials in. They take on this hell type of cargo that is specifically needed to travel through realms into hell. So the human world and hell can be bridged together by this cargo that allows to create a dimensional portal as they're heading over there. And they encounter a lot of problems, not just between the different characters and their backgrounds, but also by different monsters. There are creatures in here, in this story, that emerge from hell. They're called the Holy Cockroaches of Hell. And these creatures are called carrion angels. And they're described as these giant 7-foot tall kind of like creatures, slender creatures with dislocated limbs and, kind of like that Wendigo appearance. But they are these dark versions of angels. They look like crows. They have these hooked beaks with razor sharp jagged teeth in them. They have these rag like clothing that flows out of their heads and bodies. And their eyes are these burning cinders with smokes come out of. And these creatures can fly, and these creatures have a ability to, let's say, potentially inhabit hosts. And when they inhabit hosts, it's described as them entering through open wounds, and the host, like let's say a human, would potentially, either a human or whatever living creature they infest, has their skin start being ripped apart and opened in order to house the basically the carrion angel presence. So basically, imagine if this jacket was real tight on me and I put it on and it started ripping apart to conform to my body. Basically, that's what these carrion angels do. They enter inside of open wounds that they either inflict upon you or are already on you, and then as they infest you, they basically wear you like a really tight jacket and rip you open and dislocate you and basically manipulate you like a puppet. Very terrifying. They can do it with a bunch of different living creatures, and it's horrific. And these creatures basically give these pirates and cult a lot of trouble, and as they enter into hell, you find out this grand plot that the main character and this cult are kind of wanting to do. You actually get to not go into hell itself, but you actually get to enter the borders of hell, and you get these fantastical descriptions of the landscape, some of the creatures in there. There is a entrance that one of these Voyager monks from the first story that I talked about, the Atlas from Hell, one of them gets involved with the crew, and the way they get introduced to this crew is one of the most badass things I ever read out of adult horror. It is fantastic. And this novelette overall has so many great things in it. I don't want to talk about more because it might spoil the overall grand thing. A lot of fantastic creature features and stuff involving the story. Body horror, gore, intense action, interesting characters, interesting dilemmas, greater moral, ethical stuff. And the climax is fucking wild. It is a fucking wild shit show. And I mean a literal wild shit show. Like, god damn. But it gets a 10 out of 10. This is a perfect short story to me, and I felt like I was really watching a movie. And yeah, that wraps up my review of 6 stories from the Borders of Hell. Sorry if this ran a little bit long, but this is a fantastical story collection. I did want to talk about it. Again, this gets a 9.5 out of 10. I recommend all you adults read it. And yeah, that's all I have for today involving it. Go check it out. I'm going to be checking out more adult horror, reading more books, obviously. I have some books I still have left to cover. And if you like this video and you've never heard of this book and you want to check it out, if I put you on, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button down below. It's free and lets me know you guys are engaged with the content and you support it. So please help me out and help build the community. And yeah, let me know some books you guys may want me to review. What are your thoughts if you've read the short story collection? Are you interested to check it out? What are your favorite types of adult horror that you like reading? And yeah, that's all I have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed, and deuces. Man, the fact that I had to record this whole thing a second time is really painful. I was like, god damn, bro. But the fact that I get to rock it with the Bane jacket, yo, that Bane intro wasn't for nothing. You like the jacket? It's swaggy. That's the only real reason I'm putting up with it. And also, I need to put out more content. And I love this book. So go check it out, please. Fantastic. Although I probably need to watch some more Scooby-Doo because mentally scarred after reading that.